Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update from Luke Ten Have, private investor in the resource space and founder of golddiscovery.com. And Luke, it's always great getting you on the show just to talk about the resource stocks, what you're looking at. You always have an interesting take. And we were discussing off mic just some of the big transactions in the space, and one that really caught our eye at the beginning of this week was the news announced on Monday that Filo Corp is being acquired in a deal between BHP and Lundin Mining. So you have two mining giants teaming up to develop this large copper project, and it straddles Chile and Argentina. So it's not even in one country, it's right on the border between two. And these are both big boy mining companies that know what they're doing. But what's your takeaway from this deal on Filo Corp getting acquired?
Yeah. Thanks for having me again, Chad. Yeah, I've never been a Filo shareholder for a very long time, unfortunately. I owned it for a little while and maybe I sort of traded it. Not the ideal way, obviously. Yeah, very impressive deal. You wonder why Lundin is involved. I think BHP could have done it themselves. So there must be a reason for Lundin to be involved. And I guess it's related to details that make it easier to have them involved other than just the capital. So that could be the experience and the permitting and the water, and maybe because of the two different countries the deposit is in. And Lundin owns the Josemaria project that they acquired, I think, last year for about 600 or 700 million. So I think it's a combination of factors that makes Lundin Mining an important factor in this deal. And it's interesting to note that this is an acquisition without a maiden resource. And maybe you could argue, yeah, there is a resource from before the discovery, but there's not really a resource statement that was done since the discovery in 2021. And from that point of view, it's sort of the Great Bear model, selling without a resource.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, man. I was thinking of Great Bear when you were talking about that because we haven't seen many deals like that where pre-resource companies are taken out by large companies. Really, we haven't seen it since Great Bear. But what does this mean for the copper space in the sense that we see two big companies teaming up, and copper projects are huge. They cost a lot of money. They take a lot of expertise. They take a lot of permitting, skilled labor. I mean, there's all these things that go into bringing a copper mine online. Are we going to see more deals like this where two maybe polymetallic producers come together, or a gold company and a base metals company come together? Do you think we'll see more deals like this where it just takes two companies to pull these things off?
Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, there's a lot of M&A discussion on podcasts and chats and online, and people want to box it into the topic. So right now this happens. So is this now the new thing? I don't think so. I think it's really on a topic by topic basis. So this is two countries, very big deposit, Lundin being involved with it for a very long time, them having the deposit, Josemaria, them being involved with NGX, who initially had a porphyry, and then once they finally had some budget available for real exploration drilling, made a discovery really, really quickly, which is also kind of unique. Typically, these things take a long time, and I think this NGX discovery, this really high-grade discovery, was made pretty quickly, considering when they got the budget assigned for this program and made the discovery. So I think it's in this case a combination of the Lundin Mining family or group having so much control with NGX and Josemaria and the long time with Filo, and perhaps their political connections and their permitting experience that brings them together in this case. And maybe Lundin Mining is a target themselves at some point in the future. And if BHP takes the best projects and spins the rest off, I mean, I think every deal is sort of separate. Sometimes it is sharing a deposit, which is the key reason to do it together. Sometimes it is the investors behind it. Sometimes it's just a capital constraint, like the Nevada partnership, where the two big ones partner up to really make it one big operation. So I think it's a one by one. At least I consider it every situation to be different, and this one as well.
Yeah, fair point. Every situation is different, and the reasons to work together are different. I was just thinking of exactly what you just mentioned there, Nevada gold mines with Barrick and Newmont working together. Also, when the Malartic mine came on in Canada, it was so big that it took Agnico Eagle and Yamana to do it together and to partner up before that changed over time. But just an idea also that the Lundin family has been so entrenched in that whole copper belt because in addition to NGX and Josemaria, they also have the operating Caserones mine. And they've also had to look at permitting and getting water in that area is a challenge, and they've even got into desalination plants and they have good relationships with the government. How much of it do you think is just the force of nature that is the Lundin family in the mining business and the experience they bring to the table?
Yeah, I think it is because it's the family with their reputation, but it's not just because it's them. It is indeed because they have those years of experience. They have done it before. They are a credible party to work with. So since I'm not a shareholder of Filo, I think details can really make a difference here. I don't think it's the capital, obviously. It must be something different than capital. Why to partner up? Because BHP doesn't need Lundin's capital to make it work. A lot of juniors would need it, but not BHP. So it must be experience, their ownership of assets in the area, their experience in the area, their connections in the area that makes it work. And of course, it's an interesting angle because you could look at other scenarios and think like, what does it take for this project to work? I mean, we talked about it last time about Rupert and Orion in Finland. Do they have to team up to make it work? We talked about Faraday offline, Ivanhoe Electric, Arizona Sonoran. What will it take for those deposits in that area to work? And sometimes I think a partnership is the key thing. The Canadian Malartic situation a couple of years ago, 10 years ago, was a hostile situation with Gold Corp, with Agnico stepping in because of that situation that happened. So sometimes just things happen and companies will have to act because otherwise they don't have that opportunity anymore, which in case of the Canadian Malartic, and that's when Agnico stepped in. So that's why I'm saying every situation is different, and it is very interesting to look at all those different situations and what does it take for such a big thing to happen. But Filo, of course, it was pretty obvious that this one was going to be taken over at some point. Nobody was expecting, I think, for them to do it completely on their own without getting any external partner, and that's what happened.
Well, and look, you brought up Faraday Copper. We were talking about that off mic because it's a Lundin company now as well. They're involved in there. And we were just mentioning what a force they've been in taking strategic positions in things like Fireweed Metals, Montage Gold. But yeah, the Faraday Copper. So if you think about that, when they get a stake in the company, they're not just like, hey, they got a lot of money and they're getting in. These guys are mine builders, they're developers, they bring capital market experience, but they also bring engineering, mine building, and production experience to the table. What do you think about them just kind of as a force of nature in the mining sector?
Yeah, it makes such a difference. Every time you see, I mean, there's only a couple of names, I think, outside of the majors. If you look at private capital, there's only a couple of names, I think, in the mining industry, especially in Canada, that really make a difference. And then you think about, for sure, the Lundin family, Pierre Lassonde, or in this case, Murray Edwards is also a shareholder of Faraday. Then, of course, you have Robert Friedland, who is not typically an investor. Every now and then you see him crossing 10%, but it doesn't happen very often. But he's one of those big names. And then you have Eric Sprott, of course, in a different sort of capacity. So for sure, those names make a big difference to a company. So Faraday, without those names, is a completely different company in my mind than Faraday with those names. And if I had to choose between the companies in that area, I would choose Faraday because of those names involved. Even if for some reason the project is not progressing well or is going to succeed, they likely find a way to make it work by perhaps merging with a company in that region that has a better project. And I'm not saying Faraday has a bad project, but I'm just saying in case something goes wrong, they could still make it work. And if you don't have those people, in a lot of cases, it's just game over if some critical red flag shows up. And that's why I think investing alongside those people is typically lower risk, but of course, in most cases, also you're buying a more expensive stock because the moment you find out those people are involved, the price is in most cases already a bit higher than without them.
When you invest in a company and you see a strategic come in, or let me ask you this, before you're in a company and you see a strategic come in, does it make you have more confidence to go ahead and get positioned? Or do you like to be positioned before that happens? And then obviously it's nice to see it happen after the fact, but would you go into a company because of a strategic partnership, any commodity, gold, silver, copper, whatever, would you be interested in getting involved yourself once you see the vetting process having happened with the major?
Yeah, so I invest a lot in these small companies where I feel I have an edge, and I only invest in the bigger companies. And bigger, I already mean bigger by 100 million or 200 million. So when something else is special, and I invested in Montage in March when I saw Lundin stepping up their game over there, and it completely made a difference, and it went up 2 or 3x. And in the Faraday case, I would indeed invest because those people invested. So I would need somebody like them to be involved for myself to get involved in a bigger play. Because for a company of 100 million or 200 million to go to 2 billion, it's very difficult to see that without some strategic involvement. Almost no matter how good the project is, unless it's a discovery, maybe a really new discovery that completely changes everything. Faraday is a deposit that has been known about and is being worked on. And I think if you get these people involved, then capital is not really a big risk anymore. And raising capital is normally the biggest risk in this game. So that you don't have to worry about that too much anymore. If they already own stock, they don't want to be diluted themselves anymore. So everything just goes a bit easier, which doesn't mean that the stuff in the ground changes, but everything around it, all those factors working on the project, just completely make it easier. And in this Faraday case, of course, you have Ivanhoe Electric next door and Arizona Sonoran with Rio Tinto and Newton, and then these Pierre Lundin and Murray Edwards. So you have so many people together trying to make something work there in the copper space that the likelihood of that succeeding in some shape or form is just way higher than in a situation like that without those people. And of course, those people have their advisors and they know what they're buying. They're not just... So I think it de-risks the complete game completely. And yes, that's why I would get involved in something like that.
Yeah, some solid points because there's more than just having a good project. You really need the right people. You need access to capital. You need experience. You need people that can bring the right kind of team together. And you need momentum in the market. And all those things can happen when the right team and the right people get involved. And there's some synergies, like you mentioned. Yeah, and Arizona is going to be interesting to follow just because Arizona Sonoran, Ivanhoe Electric, Faraday Copper, all right there. The world wants more copper. They want domestic supplies from North America. And Arizona is the #1 state in the U.S. for copper production. So it looks like at one point those projects either get consolidated into 2 projects or maybe just one larger project. It'll be interesting to watch that unfold over the years. But you brought up that you like to get in some smaller companies and look at the exploration side and something unique. Are you seeing any opportunities in the exploration side of the business, really in any commodity, anything catching your eye as far as the drill plays?
Yeah, in June, Ramp Metals announced a new gold discovery, and I only knew them because I talked to them in Vancouver, I think in January, when they were raising 15 cents the first round before going public. And they were looking for a nickel discovery and had this thesis of an eye-like structure, which was a little bit like the eye structure that was, Sirius Resources made a big discovery in Australia in 2012, and there was a magnetic signature that looked like an eye, and they also saw this eye, and you could explain that as a intrusion or a dome or some feature that's favorable for nickel to show up if you are in a nickel belt. And then they did a couple of geophysical surveys. They had a couple of conductors, so they wanted to drill for nickel. And I felt like, well, it's a very interesting story, but if you only have that target right now, you drill it, and it doesn't show up in a couple of holes, then the story is almost over. And that's why I felt it's just a one topic story that is either amazing or nothing. And if it's nothing, then of course it goes to $2 million or something. And I felt like, well, let them just drill and see what they get. And they were surprised themselves to find a lot of gold, 70 grams, 75 grams gold over 7.5 meters. And the company was still only a $5 million company, I think, at the time of the discovery in June. And I immediately called my broker to put a bid in, and we were unfortunately a bit late. We were a couple of seconds late, so I wanted to take out the complete bid price or the ask price, and somebody else was ahead of me by 2 seconds, and then I had to move it up, and I was every time a little bit late, so I finally got my first shares somewhere in the mid-30s, and then kept on buying, and today the stock is trading at 85 cents. And what it really is nobody knows. It's a really weird situation where they have a lot of gold, but the visuals of this discovery didn't interest them enough to even look at it themselves when they were logging the core in Saskatchewan, where this discovery is. And only when they got the assays back, they were like, whoa, we didn't see this coming. And then they staked more ground and started logging the core in more detail. And I think part of it was because it was extremely cold at the time in Saskatchewan, but still a complete surprise to them and to the market. And that's why the stock went up. It's still not very expensive, I think, but it's just one hole. And one hole is, of course, not much. It's more than just finding something on surface, for sure. But one hole is still very uncertain. So I like it. It's mysterious. It could be the start of an amazing discovery process. or it could be the start of almost nothing if they drill a couple of holes around it and they don't find anything. And that makes these things so difficult to invest, how to deal with that situation.
Yeah, it's really interesting because exploration can have a lot of science behind it and a lot of data sets, but it's also involves a lot of luck. And it makes you wonder, Fathom Nickel's right by that as well. And everybody was focused on the nickel story, but very few companies in the past had even assayed for multi-elements just to see what else was in there. And the word that I got through the grapevine was that the company at Ramp Metals was basically assaying every 15 meters and just trying to see, is there anything in here, and doing multi-element assays. And then it comes back with a bonanza grade gold hit. It makes you wonder, how many times have companies been drilling in the right area, but maybe not assayed for the right metal? Maybe they were looking for the wrong metal. Or it makes you wonder how many times people didn't assay certain parts of their deposit and missed a bonanza grade discovery. How do you weigh in, the factor of luck into investing?
Well, I would never try to. I mean, I'm long enough into this game that I'm not going to try to get lucky myself, because I feel like I'm not lucky very often. Most of the successes came from a lot of work and dedication. And every now and then you need a bit of luck, but I don't feel so lucky that I'm counting on it. So I always think about scenarios like, what could happen with this company? What's the base sort of value that I'm investing at? What could go wrong in the worst case scenario? What could be the ideal scenario? What's sort of the one in the middle? And that's why I didn't buy Ramp, because the story was really, I mean, I'm not going to really repeat the story from 6 months ago, but it was still intriguing comparing it to the serious discovery, Nova in Australia. But of course, every company sort of does that all the time. I mean, they take their situation, they compare it to something amazing, and they put it together, I mean, next to each other, and you think, yeah, indeed looks similar. But almost never it works out, of course. That's just the nature of our game that we are in. And that's why I typically assume that everything will go wrong from a drilling point of view. So anything I buy, I want to make money. Well, it sounds weird and ridiculous, but I try to make money even if the drilling is not a success. And I think you can only do that by investing ahead of time, really early on, before most people get in. And it's almost a game of finding where people will be in 6 months from now or in 12 months from now, if you're really into the early small juniors. And that means, like, you find a company, you see that they have an interesting project and it's in a good area and the people around it know what they do, but they are getting started, or something went wrong in the past and nobody cares anymore. They didn't update the presentation anymore, which for most people is just a no-go. And I think I like those situations, because then you call them up and you ask them, what are you doing? Are you going to do any work on this thing? And of course they will answer the phone and they will explain you what they're doing. And if they're not doing anything, then why bother? But if they tell me, yeah, we have an idea and this is what we're going to do, and for these reasons we were not doing anything for 2 years, and it makes sense to me, then that would be on its own already be something like, hey, in 6 months' time, they may have a corporate presentation again. They may be presenting on a conference again. They may have road shows again. So it's way easier to predict where people will go to in 6 months than predicting where the next discovery will be. So I'm trying to find situations where nobody really cares at that moment, and I want to understand why. And if the reason why is not, killing the company or a problem for me, that's the moment I want to get into a story. And in most cases, of course, I want to have something that has the odds for discovery and has a good story and a real geological idea behind it. But just, there are so many good ideas that I get presented, well, me judging as a non-geo, thinking like, well, this is interesting, that, from a numbers point of view, the likelihood of making money is so small that I think there needs to be more than just hoping for that hole to hit. And that's why I'm not that person just hoping for that. I do have a couple of positions where I am waiting and I'm giving them time, and I don't care if they don't hit in the first 6 months. But that needs to be a company that doesn't have just one target and they can kill the target and then the story is over. It needs to be a company with several targets and a big land package where the market in general knows that even if they are not going to hit something like Sun Peak in Ethiopia, they have plenty of other targets and they are just as legitimate as the first one. And then I don't really mind waiting it out and giving them time to figure it out for them, people running the company.
Yeah, some great points. And I think a lot of people in the sector speculate by hoping that the company hits when they're in a pre-discovery story. And you can have a good team and you can have good science, but still nobody knows till you poke the holes in the ground and get the assays back. but you're trying to stack the odds in your favor. And it is tough because there's 1,000 exploration companies out there all waving the arm saying, we've got this idea, we've got another idea. And it all sounds interesting from one point of view. But until somebody actually makes a discovery and shows that there's proof in the pudding, it is a game of science meets hope and luck. But you're trying to stack the odds in your favor as an investor and look for stories that maybe aren't getting the love and get in early before they get re-rated. Are there any other stories like that that have your attention? Because you did mention you're in some stories after success, like Montage, where the Lundin Mining family got involved, or what we were just talking about as far as Ramp, where you saw the result and then you got involved. Are there any stories where they haven't made a discovery yet, but you're excited about the setup and think that maybe it's an overlooked opportunity?
Yeah, I bought stock of SRQ Resources, and I never heard about this company until I saw news. I think it was in May. They announced visuals, and I typically hate those things because when you have visuals, people, already think like, oh, this looks good. This probably grades well, and then they're going to buy it if the visuals look good. And I almost never buy these things, but this was a $2 million company at the time, or $2.5 million, and it's still it's not much more than that. It's now a $3.5 million company, and they released some visuals of also nickel exploration. In this case, they really look for nickel, and I don't think they are in the process of finding gold like Ramp. And they found a big intrusive. And let me just say that what they found is, they found a lot of ingredients for a nickel scenario, and they found a Gossan a year or two earlier. I didn't know about it. I didn't know the company at all, but they found a Gossan in an area that has never been drilled, and they drilled under that Gossan, and they found nickel and copper. Just not very high grade yet. 0.5% nickel, 0.5% copper over 20 meters, I think, was the best hole. And then they did more geophysical surveys and found really big magnetic and gravity anomalies. And when they were drilling under that Gossan again, they just got the results back from a gravity survey. And they found a very big gravity anomaly, very deep, about 1 kilometer or 2 from their main target below the Gossan. And they decided to drill one hole into it now that they were there anyways, and because it was such a big target. But they made a bit of a rookie mistake by not having enough time or enough drill rods to get as deep as they had to be. So they were like 600-700 meters deep, and 200 meters away from the target, they had to abort the operation. But did find some interesting visuals, and the news release was about these visuals, the 700 meters of intrusive rock. And at the end, they found some mineralization, and that stock, there was a lot of stock available. So what I do, I investigate like who owns this, and I saw they did a flow-through financing about 6 months earlier, and in most cases flow-through financing just lead to selling 4 months later, because the people buying it are funds that want to get a tax break, and they buy it for tax reasons, not for the company reasons. And there was a lot of selling in the 2 months before this announcement, and I calculated that most of the stock was probably sold already, but there was probably $1 million or $2 million left. And I saw this iceberg order at 9.5 cents and decided to start buying it. And after quite a bit of stock that day, I noticed that I bought the last bit because it was not showing up anymore, this iceberg order. That every time showed a new sell order every time I bought it out. And when it was done, the stock really started moving more than I expected, and went from 10 cents or 9.5 cents to 45 cents in 1.5 days. Completely surprised, and I saw my position really like wow, I became rich in a very short time. Of course, I'm joking a little bit, but not completely. It was really surprising, but I didn't sell because I was just surprised, and I thought, well, there's so much volume coming in, perhaps some smarter money as well, but it was not the case, and it was probably a rookie mistake on my end by not selling a little bit, and the stock completely crashed again to 20 cents and then again to 10 cents. So my complete win was gone, and it was back at where it started. And that was because when the essays came out, there was no real grade in those samples, which I didn't expect anyways. It was really a geological discovery where they were 200 meters short of the target, and it was just showing that the complete environment was looking good and they were close to a target. And that it was enough for me to buy it, but I sort of expected the market to know that this was not going to run very high grade, and perhaps the market was surprised by it and sold off. And now it's a 14-cent stock or something like that. And I think it's still very interesting, but no longer trading at 45 cents.
No, it's not. It's the proverbial round trip in the junior mining sector that we so often see. But yeah, you were paper rich there for a second and then watched the rug pulled out. But you're still in it because you still think there's some opportunity there. There's some follow-up drilling there. And a lot of times it doesn't happen on the first drill program. It takes a second or a third or even a seventh drill program to really dial it in. But I like the way you look at these pre-discovery stories and the reasons that you give for positioning in them, and just always enjoy getting your thoughts. So if people like getting Luke's thoughts, definitely click on the link below. It takes you over to Gold Discovery, which is really his site for doing research for the resource investors out there. But we'll also put a link to his Twitter or CEO.ca page where you can follow along with his individual thoughts on the companies he's got on his radar. And as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. And next time I've got something new that we are developing with Gold Discovery that, and I said that last time as well, but now we are really just weeks away. And I guess I really think that people find this pretty cool. It's something that's not available right now, and it's pretty crazy if you think about it that it's not available. And I will next time explain that a little bit next to reviewing whatever is happening in the business by then.
Okay, so leaving us with a little cliffhanger here. So we'll definitely check back in with you and when you get that up and running and highlight some of the features on the new site or the enhanced site. So we'll keep tabs on that and looking forward to chatting with you again maybe in a month or so.
Yeah, for sure. We will. Thanks again.